In the shadowed corridors of Renaissance Florence, where whispered words could topple governments and a single glance could seal one's fate, understood a truth that most mortals spend lifetimes failing to grasp. True power lies not in the sword you wield, but in the presence you command when the sword remains sheathed. The ability to make others lean forward when you speak, to create silence when you enter a room, to leave people wondering about your thoughts long after you've departed. This is the essence of what we might call a dangerously intriguing presence. The term dangerously intriguing captures a paradox that himself embodied. Danger implies threat, unpredictability, the capacity to inflict harm or create profound change. Intrigue suggests mystery, fascination, the irresistible pull of the unknown. When combined in human presence, these qualities create a magnetism that transcends ordinary social dynamics. It is the difference between being merely liked and being unforgettable, between wielding influence and commanding respect, between surviving in the world's arenas and conquering them. His own life this principle. Born into a world where political survival required more than noble birth or righteous intentions, he learned to navigate the treacherous waters of power through careful observation, strategic thinking, and most crucially, the cultivation of a presence that could serve multiple masters while serving none completely. His contemporaries found him simultaneously trustworthy and suspect, brilliant and calculating, charming and potentially dangerous. This ambiguity was not accidental. It was his greatest weapon. The foundation of such presence begins with understanding that humans are fundamentally drawn to what they cannot fully understand or control. We are creatures of pattern recognition, constantly seeking to categorize and predict the behavior of those around us. When someone defies easy categorization, when their responses seem both logical and surprising, when their motivations remain partially obscured, when their capabilities appear both evident and mysteriously vast, we become fascinated. This fascination is the first step toward influence. Consider how approached his relationships with the powerful figures of his time. He never presented himself as a mere sycophant, eager to agree with whatever his superiors proposed. Nor did he position himself as an enemy, openly challenging their authority. Instead, he cultivated what we might call useful unpredictability. He would offer counsel that was simultaneously loyal and independent, support that came with subtle conditions, agreement that revealed hidden complexities. His patrons found him invaluable precisely because they could never be entirely certain what he might say or do next. Yet they trusted that whatever it was would serve their interests in ways they might not have anticipated. This approach requires a sophisticated understanding of human psychology that goes far beyond simple manipulation. True Machiavellian presence is built on genuine insight into the fears, desires, and blind spots of others. It requires the ability to see the world from multiple perspectives simultaneously, to understand not just what people say they want, but what they actually need, what they fear to admit, and what they don't yet know they're missing. The cultivation of such presence begins with self-knowledge of an almost ruthless variety. Advocated for what he called, the view from the mountain, the ability to step outside oneself and observe one's own thoughts, motivations, and behaviors with the same clinical detachment one might apply to studying an enemy's strategy. This self-awareness allows one to manage the impression one creates rather than simply hopping for the best. Most people stumble through social and professional interactions without any real strategy, reacting to situations rather than shaping them. They reveal too much of themselves too quickly, making themselves predictable and therefore dismissible. Or they reveal too little, making themselves forgettable. The person with dangerously intriguing presence walks a more complex path, revealing just enough to create interest while maintaining enough mystery to sustain it. This requires mastering what understood as the art of selective revelation. Every piece of information about yourself that you choose to share or withhold is a strategic decision. Your opinions, your background, your capabilities, your plans, each of these can be deployed at the optimal moment for maximum impact. The key is to always leave people wanting to know more, while ensuring that what they do know paints a picture of someone worth knowing better. The physical aspects of presence cannot be ignored in this equation. Himself was known for his careful attention to dress and bearing, not out of vanity, but out of understanding that humans make unconscious judgments based on visual cues within seconds of meeting someone. The way you occupy space, the rhythm of your movements, the quality of your attention when others speak, these create the foundation upon which all other aspects of presence are built. Physical presence alone is insufficient. The truly dangerous element of Machiavellian presence lies in intellectual and emotional unpredictability. This doesn't mean being erratic or unstable, quite the opposite. It means being so thoroughly in control of yourself that you can choose your responses rather than defaulting to automatic reactions. When someone expects anger, you might respond with curiosity. When they expect agreement, you might ask a question that reframes the entire conversation. When they expect you to be impressed by their status or achievements, you might acknowledge them while subtly shifting the conversation to deeper territory. This kind of presence is dangerous because it disrupts the normal flow of social interaction in ways that can be profoundly disorienting. Most people operate on social autopilot, following predictable scripts for different types of encounters. When someone refuses to play by these unspoken rules, when they respond to small talk with genuine insight, when they meet aggression with calm curiosity, when they treat powerful people with respectful irreverence, they create a kind of cognitive disruption that demands attention. The intrigue factor comes from the fact that such behavior suggests hidden depths. If someone can respond to situations in unexpected yet appropriate ways, what other capabilities might they possess? If they seem comfortable violating minor social conventions, what major conventions might they be willing to challenge? If they can remain calm and thoughtful in situations where others become emotional and reactive, what kind of person are you actually dealing with? Understood that reputation is a form of power that can be more valuable than actual resources, because reputation influences how others treat you before they have any real evidence of your capabilities. The person who is known to be dangerously intriguing will find doors opening that remain closed to others, will discover people going out of their way to include them in conversations and opportunities, will notice others watching their reactions and seeking their opinions even when they haven't explicitly established expertise in a given area. But this power comes with responsibilities and risks that was careful to acknowledge. The same presence that can open doors can also create enemies. People who feel unsettled by your presence may seek to undermine you. Those who cannot understand your motivations may assume the worst. The very unpredictability that makes you intriguing can also make you seem untrustworthy to those who value conventional reliability above all else. Therefore, the cultivation of dangerously intriguing presence must be balanced with what called the appearance of virtue. This doesn't mean being genuinely virtuous, though that's not discouraged, but rather ensuring that your actions and words can be interpreted as serving positive purposes. Your unpredictability should seem like wisdom rather than chaos. Your mystery should suggest depth rather than deception. Your ability to disrupt social norms should appear to serve higher principles rather than mere rebellion. The foundation of such presence also requires developing what we might call strategic empathy, the ability to understand others deeply enough to know how to reach them, influence them, and work with them effectively, while maintaining enough emotional distance to make clear-headed decisions. This is perhaps the most challenging aspect of Machiavellian presence to master, because it requires being simultaneously deeply human and somewhat detached from the normal human need for approval and belonging. Most people's social behavior is driven by an unconscious desire to be liked, accepted, and validated. While these are natural human needs, they can also be sources of weakness when they drive one to be predictable, compliant, or self-deprecating. The person with truly intriguing presence has learned to meet these needs through their own self-respect and internal validation, freeing them to interact with others from a position of strength rather than need. This doesn't mean being cold or aloof. In fact, the most dangerous form of Machiavellian presence often appears warm, engaged, and genuinely interested in others. But underneath this warmth lies a core of self-possession that cannot be shaken by others' approval or disapproval. This creates an paradoxical effect. People are drawn to someone who seems to like them but clearly doesn't need them, who appears interested in their thoughts but isn't seeking their validation. The foundation work of building such presence requires honest assessment of your current social patterns. How predictable are your responses to different types of people and situations? How much of yourself do you reveal in casual conversation? How often do you find yourself seeking others' approval or validation? How frequently do you end conversations feeling like the other person knows significantly more about you than you know about them? These patterns, once identified, can be gradually modified through conscious practice. Begin by experimenting with silence, allowing conversations to breathe rather than rushing to fill every pause. Practice asking questions that reveal your intelligence without revealing your positions. Learn to acknowledge compliments without diminishing yourself or overselling your achievements. Develop the ability to disagree without becoming disagreeable, to challenge without attacking, to remain mysterious without being dishonest. The goal is not to become manipulative or calculating in a harmful sense, but rather to become more intentional about the impression you create and the dynamics you establish with others. Himself was motivated not by malice, but by a desire to understand and work effectively within the realities of human nature and political power. His insights into presence and influence were tools for navigating a complex world, not weapons for attacking innocent people. As we move deeper into understanding these principles, it becomes clear that dangerously intriguing presence is not about adopting a false persona or learning tricks to fool people. It's about developing your authentic self to its fullest potential, understanding the impact you have on others, and learning to shape that impact in ways that serve both your goals and the broader good. It's about becoming the kind of person who naturally commands attention and respect because they have something genuinely valuable to offer, delivered in ways that people find compelling and memorable. The foundation of such presence is built through careful observation, honest self-assessment, strategic thinking, and consistent practice. But as himself understood, knowledge without application is merely academic exercise. The true test of these principles lies in how they play out in the complex, unpredictable theater of actual human interaction. Part II, the architecture of influence through strategic unpredictability. The second pillar of Machiavellian presence rests upon what we might call the architecture of influence, the systematic construction of relationships and reputation that amplifies one's natural charisma into something approaching social gravity. Like the master architect who understands that a building's power lies not in its individual stones, but in how those stones work together to create something larger than their sum. The person seeking dangerously intriguing presence must understand how individual interactions combine to create an overall effect that transforms how others perceive and respond to them. Observe that most people approach influence backward. They believe that power creates presence, when in fact presence creates power. They assume that once they achieve certain positions or accumulate certain resources, they will naturally command the respect and attention they desire. But's own career demonstrated the opposite truth. It was his presence and reputation for insight that opened doors, created opportunities, and allowed him to punch far above his formal station in life. The architecture of influence begins with understanding what's called the ecology of attention. In any social environment, there exists a complex ecosystem of relationships, hierarchies, information flows, and unspoken rules. Most people see only the surface level of these dynamics: who reports to whom, who seems to have official authority, who appears to be well-liked. But the person building dangerously intriguing presence learns to perceive the deeper currents. Who actually influences decisions, who serves as an information hub, who has the power to make others' lives easier or more difficult, who shapes opinions through informal conversations. This deeper understanding allows for what practiced as strategic positioning. Rather than simply trying to please the most obviously powerful people, he identified the less obvious but equally important nodes in the network: the trusted advisors, the information brokers, the people who, while not making final decisions themselves, significantly influenced how those decisions were framed and considered. He cultivated relationships with these individuals not through obvious flattery, but through demonstrating that he understood and could contribute to their areas of influence. The key insight here is that dangerously intriguing presence is not about being the loudest voice in the room or the most obvious candidate for attention. It's about becoming indispensable to the ecosystem in ways that others don't immediately recognize or understand. This requires what termed the long game, building influence through consistent value creation rather than dramatic gestures. Consider how approached his correspondence, which has survived to give us insight into his methods. His letters were never simple communications. They were carefully crafted to serve multiple purposes simultaneously. A single letter might convey necessary information, demonstrate his analytical capabilities, position him as a valuable source of insight, subtly influence the recipient's thinking on broader issues, and plant seeds for future conversations, all while maintaining a tone that seemed natural and uncontrived. This multi-layered communication style is characteristic of presence that transcends ordinary social interaction. While most people use conversation primarily to exchange information or establish social connection, the person with Machiavellian presence uses every interaction as an opportunity to subtly shape perceptions, test ideas, gather intelligence, and strengthen their position in the larger ecosystem. This doesn't mean being manipulative or dishonest, quite the opposite. It means being so thoroughly prepared and intentional that you can accomplish multiple legitimate objectives through the same action. The architecture of such influence requires developing what modern psychology might recognize as exceptional emotional intelligence, but with a strategic sophistication that goes beyond simply being empathetic. You must learn to read not just what people are feeling, but what they're trying to accomplish, what they're worried about, what they need but haven't articulated, and how their personal objectives align or conflict with various organizational or social dynamics. This level of social intelligence allows for what practiced as strategic generosity, offering value to others in ways that establish your usefulness while positioning you favorably for future interactions. But this generosity is never random or unconditional. Every favor granted, every piece of advice offered, every connection made serves the dual purpose of genuinely helping others while building a network of positive associations with your presence. For example, was known for his ability to introduce people who could help each other, facilitating connections that created value for all parties, while establishing himself as someone who understood the larger landscape well enough to see opportunities others missed. This kind of contribution requires genuine insight and effort, but it pays dividends far beyond the immediate transaction because it demonstrates that you see and think about others' interests even when there's no obvious benefit to you. The dangerous aspect of this approach lies in its subtlety and long-term effectiveness. People often don't immediately recognize when someone is building influence in this way because the individual actions seem so reasonable and helpful. By the time they realize that this person has become central to information flows and relationship networks, the influence is already established and difficult to counter. The intriguing aspect comes from the fact that such influence is clearly intentional, yet serves everyone's interests. People can sense that you're operating with more strategic awareness than average, but they also recognize that your success seems to lift others rather than diminishing them. This creates a form of cognitive fascination. They want to understand how you think and operate, partly to learn from you and partly to ensure they remain in your good graces. Building this kind of influence requires mastering several specific skills that throughout his career. First is the ability to synthesize information from multiple sources to create insights that no single source could provide. Was famous for his ability to take fragmented pieces of political intelligence and weave them together into comprehensive analysis that helped his readers understand the larger patterns at play. This skill made him valuable to people who were too busy or too narrowly focused to do such synthesis themselves. Second is the capacity to communicate complex ideas in ways that feel both accessible and sophisticated. His writing demonstrates how to present challenging concepts without talking down to readers or oversimplifying important nuances. This balance allows you to be helpful to people at different levels of expertise while demonstrating your own depth of understanding. Third is the discipline to remain consistent in your approach, even when immediate rewards aren't obvious. Building architectural influence requires what called the patience of the gardener planting seeds, tending them carefully, and trusting that the harvest will come in due season. Many people abandon this approach when they don't see quick results, reverting to more obvious but less effective methods of seeking attention or recognition. Fourth is the wisdom to know when and how to call upon the influence you've built. Was careful never to overuse his relationships or ask for more than his accumulated goodwill could support. He understood that influence is like a bank account. You must make deposits before you can make withdrawals, and you must never withdraw more than your balance can sustain. The architecture of influence also requires understanding what observed as the paradox of power, that the more obviously you seek power, the more resistance you create. But the more others perceive you as naturally deserving of power, the more readily they grant it. This means that building dangerously intriguing presence often involves accepting influence that others offer rather than explicitly seeking it. This dynamic plays out in countless ways in modern professional and social environments. The person who obviously campaigns for promotion or recognition often creates resentment, while the person who simply demonstrates exceptional competence and judgment finds opportunities flowing toward them. The individual who directly asks to be included in important conversations may be seen as pushy, while the one who consistently offers valuable perspectives when invited finds themselves on more and more invitation lists. Managing this dynamic requires what's called the art of strategic restraint. You must develop the capability to influence outcomes while allowing others to feel that they are making their own decisions. You must be able to shape conversations while letting others feel heard and valued. You must accumulate power while enabling others to maintain their dignity and sense of agency. This approach is particularly effective in modern environments because it aligns with contemporary values around collaboration and empowerment, while still allowing for the development of personal influence and presence. People are naturally drawn to those who make them feel more capable and intelligent rather than diminished or controlled. The strategic unpredictability that characterizes dangerously intriguing presence operates within this broader architecture. Your unpredictability is not random chaos, but rather the natural result of thinking more deeply and broadly than others expect. When you consider factors that others overlook, when you see connections that others miss, when you understand implications that others haven't yet grasped, your responses naturally seem both logical and surprising. This kind of unpredictability is intriguing because it suggests that you're operating from a more sophisticated understanding of the situation than others possess. People become curious about your thinking process, eager to understand how you see things they've missed. This curiosity creates opportunities for deeper engagement and relationship building. But such unpredictability can only be sustained through genuine expertise and insight. You cannot fake this level of sophistication for long. Eventually, the gap between your presentation and your actual understanding will become apparent. Therefore, the architecture of influence must be built upon a foundation of continuous learning, careful observation, and rigorous thinking. Himself was a voracious reader and careful observer of human behavior, constantly updating his understanding based on new information and experiences. He understood that in a world where circumstances change rapidly, yesterday's insights might become tomorrow's blind spots. The person seeking to maintain dangerously intriguing presence must remain intellectually humble and adaptable even while projecting confidence and competence. The practical application of these principles requires developing systems for gathering information, processing insights, and deploying influence strategically. This might involve keeping detailed notes on important relationships, regularly seeking out diverse perspectives on key issues, practicing your communication skills in low-stakes environments, and consistently looking for ways to add value to others' efforts. It also requires the emotional discipline to maintain your strategic perspective even when faced with immediate pressures or temptations. Wrote extensively about the importance of maintaining what he called the long view, even in moments of crisis or opportunity. The person with truly dangerous presence never loses sight of their larger objectives, never sacrifices long-term positioning for short-term gains, and never allows immediate emotions to override strategic thinking. As we transition into understanding how these principles translate into contemporary application, it becomes clear that the architecture of influence is both more sophisticated and more achievable than most people realize. It requires genuine skill and sustained effort, but it doesn't require exceptional talent or extraordinary circumstances. What it requires is the willingness to think strategically about social interaction and the discipline to consistently apply that thinking over time. The reward for building such influence is not merely personal advancement, though that often follows, but rather the ability to shape outcomes in ways that create value for everyone involved. The person with dangerously intriguing presence becomes a positive force in their environment, someone whose involvement makes projects more successful, relationships more productive, and decisions more thoughtful. The modern Machiavellian transforming ancient wisdom into contemporary mastery. The final dimension of Machiavellian presence involves the delicate art of translating timeless principles of influence and intrigue into the complex social landscapes of the modern world. Today's environment presents both unprecedented opportunities and unique challenges for those seeking to cultivate dangerously intriguing presence. The pace of communication has accelerated beyond anything could have imagined. Yet the fundamental dynamics of human psychology remain remarkably consistent with what he observed in Renaissance Italy. The modern practitioner of Machiavellian presence must navigate digital environments where every interaction potentially creates a permanent record, professional cultures that explicitly value collaboration over individual dominance, and social systems that are increasingly transparent yet paradoxically more complex. These conditions require a more sophisticated approach than simple imitation of historical strategies, demanding instead a deep understanding of underlying principles that can be adapted to contemporary circumstances. The digital age has created what we might call presence at scale, the ability for individuals to project influence far beyond their immediate physical environment. Social media platforms, professional networks, and digital communication tools offer unprecedented opportunities to build reputation and relationships across vast distances and diverse communities. Yet these same tools can also make it easier for people to see through superficial attempts at impression management, requiring authenticity and substance to back up any claims to interesting or valuable presence. The modern Machiavellian understands that online presence and offline presence must be seamlessly integrated rather than treated as separate domains. Your digital communications, professional portfolio, social media activity, and in-person interactions must all tell the same story about who you are and what you represent. This consistency creates what psychologists call cognitive coherence. When all available information about someone points in the same direction, people feel more confident in their assessment and more comfortable deepening the relationship. However, consistency doesn't mean predictability. The dangerously intriguing modern presence maintains consistency of character and values while demonstrating intellectual flexibility and creative thinking. You might consistently advocate for innovative solutions while varying your approach based on the specific context. You might reliably demonstrate integrity while surprising people with the depth of your analysis or the creativity of your proposals. The contemporary application of strategic unpredictability requires understanding how modern attention works differently than in its time. In an environment of information overload, people's attention has become simultaneously more fragmented and more precious. They can't afford to waste time on interactions that don't provide clear value, yet they're constantly seeking sources of insight and inspiration that can help them navigate their own complex challenges. This creates opportunities for those who can consistently provide what we might call high-value unpredictability responses and perspectives that are simultaneously surprising and useful, that disrupt conventional thinking in ways that lead to better outcomes rather than mere confusion. The modern practitioner learns to read situational contexts quickly and respond with insights that are specifically calibrated to what the moment requires. For instance, in a business meeting where everyone is focused on short-term metrics, the person with Machiavellian presence might redirect attention to longer-term strategic implications that others haven't considered. When conversations become overly theoretical, they might introduce practical considerations that ground the discussion. When groups become mired in pessimistic analysis, they might identify opportunities that others have overlooked. Each intervention appears spontaneous, yet serves to elevate the quality of thinking and decision-making. The key is developing what we might call situational intelligence, the ability to quickly assess what type of contribution would be most valuable in any given moment. This requires not just understanding the explicit agenda of a conversation or meeting, but also reading the underlying dynamics, tensions, and unspoken concerns that might be shaping how people think and respond. Modern Machiavellian presence also requires mastery of what we might call influence without authority. In contemporary flatter organizational structures and collaborative work environments, the old models of hierarchical power are less relevant. People must learn to shape outcomes through the quality of their ideas, the strength of their relationships, and the value they create for others rather than through formal position or explicit control. This shift actually favors the Machiavellian approach, which was always more about intelligence and strategic thinking than about brute force or formal authority. The person who understands human psychology, who can see connections and implications that others miss, who can communicate complex ideas clearly and persuasively, and who consistently adds value to group efforts will naturally accumulate influence regardless of their official title or position. The practice of modern strategic generosity takes many forms that would have been impossible in this era. You might share valuable articles or insights through professional networks, make introductions between people who could help each other, offer expertise on projects outside your formal responsibilities, or provide mentorship to colleagues who are facing challenges you've previously navigated. Each of these actions builds goodwill and demonstrates your value, while positioning you as someone who thinks beyond narrow self-interest. The dangerous element of modern Machiavellian presence lies in its subtle pervasiveness. Through consistent application of strategic thinking to social and professional interaction, you gradually become indispensable to the networks and systems of which you're part. People begin to rely on your perspective, seek your advice, include you in important conversations, and defer to your judgment on matters within your demonstrated expertise. This influence accumulates gradually and often unconsciously, which makes it both powerful and difficult to counter. Unlike more obvious forms of power-seeking, which create resistance and competition, the Machiavellian approach tends to create appreciation and dependence. People are grateful for your contributions and actively want you to succeed because your success is tied to their own positive experiences and outcomes. The intriguing aspect comes from the fact that your motivations remain partially mysterious even as your value becomes clear. People can see that you think strategically and act with purpose, but they may not fully understand your long-term objectives or the complete scope of your capabilities. This uncertainty creates a form of positive tension that keeps people engaged and slightly off balance in productive ways. Managing this dynamic in modern environments requires exceptional emotional intelligence and ethical grounding. The power to influence others' thinking and decision-making carries significant responsibility. The modern Machiavellian must ensure that their influence is used in ways that genuinely benefit not just themselves, but also the people and organizations they work with. This means developing what we might call enlightened self-interest, the recognition that your long-term success depends on creating value for others and contributing to positive outcomes in your environment. The most sustainable form of dangerously intriguing presence is built on genuine competence, authentic relationships, and consistent value creation rather than on manipulation or deception. The practical development of modern Machiavellian presence begins with honest assessment of your current capabilities and reputation. What are you known for? What value do you currently provide to others? How do people typically respond to your presence and contributions? Where are the gaps between how you see yourself and how others see you? This assessment should extend beyond professional environments to include your broader social networks and community involvement. The person with truly integrated presence maintains consistency across all domains of life while adapting their expression to different contexts and audiences. From this foundation, you can begin to consciously develop the specific skills and habits that support dangerously intriguing presence. This might include improving your listening skills to better understand others' needs and perspectives, expanding your knowledge base to offer insights across a broader range of topics, practicing the art of asking questions that stimulate deeper thinking, and learning to communicate complex ideas with clarity and engagement. The development process also requires what's called the discipline of observation, paying careful attention to social and professional dynamics, noting what works and what doesn't, studying how influential people operate, and continuously refining your understanding of human behavior and organizational psychology. Modern technology offers unprecedented tools for this kind of learning. You can study the communication styles of effective leaders through recorded presentations and interviews, analyze successful social media presences to understand how influence is built and maintained online, and access vast libraries of information about psychology, strategy, and communication that would have taken a lifetime to accumulate. The key is to approach this learning strategically rather than randomly, focusing on developing capabilities that align with your natural strengths and professional objectives, while addressing weaknesses that might undermine your credibility or effectiveness. The practice of modern Machiavellian presence also requires understanding how to manage the accelerated pace of contemporary life. In time, relationships and reputations were built through extended personal interaction over long periods. Today, you might have only minutes or even seconds to make strong first impressions, and you may need to maintain relationships primarily through brief digital interactions. This requires what we might call compressed authenticity, the ability to quickly establish rapport and demonstrate value even in brief encounters. Every email, every meeting, Every casual conversation becomes an opportunity to reinforce your presence and strengthen your position in others' minds. Yet this compression cannot come at the expense of depth or substance. The modern Machiavellian learns to communicate efficiently without being shallow, to build relationships quickly without being superficial, and to demonstrate expertise without being pedantic or overwhelming. Perhaps the greatest challenge for the modern practitioner is maintaining what's called the balance of mystery. In an age of unprecedented transparency, where personal information is easily accessible and professional backgrounds are thoroughly documented, how does one maintain the element of unpredictability and intrigue that makes presence truly compelling? The answer lies not in hiding information or being secretive, but in ensuring that what is known about you raises interesting questions rather than closing them off. Your public presence should suggest greater depths rather than revealing everything. Your expertise should be evident while leaving room for people to discover additional capabilities. Your personality should be engaging while maintaining enough complexity to sustain long-term interest. This balance is achieved through what we might call strategic authenticity, being genuinely yourself, while consciously choosing which aspects of yourself to emphasize in different contexts and relationships. You're not pretending to be someone else, but you're also not randomly sharing every thought or feeling that crosses your mind. The ultimate goal of modern Machiavellian presence is not merely personal advancement, though that often follows naturally. It's the development of what we might call positive influence, the ability to shape outcomes in ways that benefit everyone involved while achieving your own legitimate objectives. This requires thinking beyond zero-sum competition to understand how individual success can be aligned with collective benefit. The most dangerous form of modern presence is dangerous precisely because it's so beneficial to others that they actively support your continued growth and success. The person who masters these principles becomes what might have called a force multiplier in their environment, someone whose presence makes everything around them work better, whose involvement increases the likelihood of positive outcomes, whose perspective helps others see possibilities they would otherwise miss. This is perhaps the most intriguing aspect of truly sophisticated presence. It transcends personal ambition to become a form of service, yet this service paradoxically creates more opportunities and influence than direct self-promotion ever could. The modern world offers unprecedented opportunities for those who understand these dynamics. In an environment where authentic expertise and genuine value creation are increasingly rare and precious, the person who can consistently provide both while maintaining an air of fascinating complexity will find themselves with more opportunities than they can pursue. The challenge is not in learning these principles, but in having the discipline to apply them consistently over time, the wisdom to use the resulting influence responsibly, and the self-awareness to continue growing and adapting as circumstances change. For those willing to undertake this development seriously, the rewards extend far beyond personal success to include the satisfaction of knowing that you're contributing positively to every environment you enter, every relationship you build, and every outcome you help to shape. This is the true legacy of Machiavellian wisdom, not the accumulation of power for its own sake, but the development of influence as a tool for creating value and achieving meaningful objectives in partnership with others. The person who masters dangerously intriguing presence becomes indispensable not because they make themselves impossible to replace, but because they make themselves impossible not to want around. They create a gravitational field of positive influence that draws opportunities, relationships, and resources naturally toward them, not through manipulation or deception, but through the consistent demonstration of value, insight, and authentic engagement with the complex realities of human interaction. This is the ultimate expression of Machiavellian wisdom in the modern age. The transformation of strategic thinking from a tool of political survival into a methodology for positive influence, meaningful contribution, and sustainable success in all domains of human endeavor.